Chapter 969, Duke. Backland, Westborough, within the Odera family's villa. Emlyn White, who had been summoned, took off his hat and coat and entered the activity room to wait. In this room, there were a few other Sanguine members who had been called by name to meet the important figure. After surveying the area, Emlyn picked a spot to sit in, right beside a man with a nose so high that it almost seemed deformed. Adorning his cut face was brown hair and red eyes. He held a comic in his hand, reading through it aimlessly. He was none other than the Sanguine who had provided Emlyn with the information about the ancient, abandoned castle in Delaire Forest. His name was Ernst Boyar, a viscount. Emlyn had planned on visiting this viscount in the next couple of days, but he never expected to bump into him here. After some careful consideration, he said in deliberation, "Your lordship, I would like to know where you obtained the intel regarding the ancient abandoned castle in Delaire Forest." "Why, did your client say that there weren't any ancient wraiths?" Ernst Boyar moved his gaze away from his comic and shot Emlyn a glance. "No, not at all." Emlyn didn't provide an explanation as he stubbornly emphasized his question again. "I'm just very curious of the source. It doesn't seem that simple." Ernst Boyar closed his comic and nodded slightly. "It's not a secret. I learned of it from Lord Nibs. To be frank, I've never heard of this before. I find it hard to imagine that there's such an ancient castle in Delaire Forest." Lord Nibs, Emlyn instinctively had some thoughts arise in him. It's another test. But isn't such a test too dangerous? It even needed Mr. Fool to resolve it. Emlyn frowned slightly as he recalled the details he had contemplated previously. He probed, "Your lordship, then why didn't you explore that ancient castle? I remember you being an archaeologist, and during this process, you'll be able to obtain the corresponding Beyonder ingredients of an ancient wraith." "Lord Nibs told me that it's very dangerous. One shouldn't approach it unless they're at the level of Earl." Emlyn's mouth gaped as his expression fell into a daze. He then held back his anger and asked with a suppressed voice, "Then, why didn't you warn me?" Ernst laughed. "Isn't it obvious? How can a location with Beyonder creatures present, one that's known by a Sanguine, still exist if not for special reasons?" Emlyn fell into a daze as Ernst added, "Normal reasoning should be like this. Ancient wraiths might exist in some place in Delaire Forest. People have encountered it before, but they were unable to find their origins. This means that finding those ancient wraiths is a very difficult and troublesome affair. The time cost exceeds their value, which allows them to live to this day. I thought you'd have easily discovered the problem with this reasoning. Likewise for your client. If they had chosen to take action, they must have had possessed the corresponding confidence." At that instant, Emlyn felt that Viscount Ernst made plenty of sense, and he could hardly rebut him. He believed that it was because he and Miss Magician were too foolish, resulting in her slamming headfirst into danger. It had nothing to do with him. The next instant, Emlyn felt embarrassed and frustrated, filled with anger towards himself. Finally, Emlyn figured out another problem. Regardless of whether the intel exposes any danger or not, Ernst Boyar should have clearly informed me of this point because figuring out the level of danger, the source of danger, and how the danger manifested itself. It held immense importance in the subsequent exploration, one that can't be missed. He did it on purpose. Emlyn came to a final conclusion as his scarlet eyes narrowed. He raised his chin and said, "Indeed. It's easy to tell, but I'm more curious about the danger lurking in that ancient abandoned castle." Ernst picked up the black tea that nearly resembled the color of blood and sipped it. "I'm not sure either. Lord Nibs didn't mention anything." Emlyn's expression sank. Just as he was about to make a derisive remark, he suddenly saw Odera Cosme walk into the activity room and look at him. "Emlyn, it's time for the meeting." "All right." Emlyn reined in his emotions and pressed onto the bottom half of his vest, standing up unhurriedly. Following him down the stairs underground, he finally couldn't help but softly ask, "Baron Cosme, who am I actually meeting? How should I address him?" Cosme, who looked like a middle-aged gentleman, didn't hide the truth. He replied with deep respect, "Duke Almer." "Duke Almer?" Emlyn subconsciously straightened his back and cast his gaze to the lamps on the wall. He appeared to use the reflection of the metal surface to check on his appearance. He was one of the 3 dukes that held up the Sanguine, an ancient powerhouse who existed before the cataclysm. His title was Round Moon, with an age exceeding 3,000 years. He had once followed in the footsteps of ancestor Lilith. Without a doubt, this was synonymous with the history and glory of the Sanguine. After passing several secret doors, Imlin and Cosme arrived inside a metal gray hall. The ground and walls were filled with green grass, flowers, and grain. Insects were crawling between the plants, making Imlin feel as though he had left the city and arrived somewhere rural. He felt life thriving all around him. Such a scene didn't seem too odd, but on careful inspection, there were many strange points. The grass had mouth-like crevices with fibers flying out of them to capture the insects. The flowers used their leaves as hands to harvest pollen for themselves. The grains were heavy, occasionally emitting wailing from inside. There was a myriad spectrum of extraordinary insects. Some had snakes for heads, others birds. These things grew lusher the closer it was to the middle of the hall. Surrounding the area was a grave filled with exuberant spirits. Cosme faced the grave and reverently bowed. "Your Grace, Emlyn White is here." "Good afternoon, Your Grace." Emlyn didn't don his usual arrogance and was, in fact, a little flustered. Inside the grave, a mellow voice which didn't betray its owner's age chuckled. "A very outstanding young Sanguine. Cosme, you may leave for now." "Yes, Your Grace." Cosme bowed in response and left the metal gray hall that was filled with freshness. Emlyn stood there, listening to the mellow voice from the grave. "In the morning, Nibs informed me that you obtained the artificial vampire Beyonder characteristic that corresponds to the Viscount title." "Yes, but it has been corrupted and requires purification." Emlyn hadn't mentioned the need to remove the mental corruption in the Beyonder characteristics, because he believed that it was a trivial matter to the Sanguine. At the very least, Baron Cosme had previously confirmed that it was possible. Almer tersely acknowledged. "Very well, I'll personally purify that characteristic." He paused before saying, "Although the Sanguine enjoy a long life, we will still mature and grow old. There will be new births and deaths. Regardless, nurturing young members is a necessity for any race. As for the excellent talent and outstanding abilities you have recently showcased, they have made you a target we place great importance on. Therefore, I personally came to meet you to give you some tests so as to expedite your growth. Excellent talent and outstanding abilities." Emlyn raised his chin slightly higher once again. He then sighed inwardly. Indeed, just as Mr. Hanged Man determined, there will be a test and mission, as well as an interview. Amidst his overflowing emotions, Emlyn replied reverently, "I'm always prepared." "Not bad," Almer's mellow voice sounded from the grave. "Your next mission is to find the key members of the Rose School of Thought that are hiding in Backland. There are very few clues for this, and many situations will require you to carry out the investigation by yourself." "Rose School of Thought. They have a grudge with us, Sanguine. They seem to be taking in some believers of the primordial moon." Emlyn actually knew quite a bit about the Rose School of Thought via the Tarot Club, but he deliberately hid this without showcasing it. Apart from taking in believers of the primordial moon, they have in their possession one of the holy artifacts of us Sanguine. It was something left by the ancestor. We need to retrieve it. There was a solemnity in Almer's voice. Left by the ancestor, holy artifact of the Sanguine. Emlyn didn't hesitate to say, "Your Grace, I'll work hard to find the key members of the Rose School of Thought in Backland." Almer's voice turned mellow. "Very good. Get some of the intel from Cosme in a while and seek out an incisive point." Emlyn was already eager to do so, but he still restrained himself, asking in deliberation, "Your Grace, do you know about the abandoned ancient castle in Delaire Forest?" "You wish to head there? It's very dangerous," Almer said from inside the grave. Emlyn didn't explain as he directly asked, "What kind of danger?" Almer chuckled. "That ancient castle might be older than me, even older than Delaire Forest. I do not know who built it. I only know that there's something sealed underground, and it hides an immense secret. Any creature that approaches it will be in danger of being corrupted by the force within. We once imagined that it has something to do with the abyss, but a devil suffered corruption after being thrown into the ancient castle as well, turning crazy and chaotic from his cold and cruel demeanor. Then why didn't you attempt to open the seal to figure out the situation? Emlyn mumbled inwardly, but didn't say a word. Almer didn't speak further as he ended the conversation and dismissed Emlyn. In the evening, Backland was covered with dark clouds as a drizzle began falling. Emlyn White wore a hat and walked under a sheltered veranda, his scarlet eyes locked onto Viscount Ernst Boyar, who was browsing some antique stores. He was upset that Ernst had given him incomplete intelligence, so he had subconsciously tailed him after leaving the Odora villa. But after a while, he felt lost. He hadn't figured out how to deal with Ernst or how severe a lesson he should teach him.